Hey, everybody, welcome to another edition of Practical Pet Chat. Lorin, I've got a question that came from the audience, and
Oh,
I think it's, do you have your dogs registered with any organizations?
because I have purebred dogs. That's why the question
Yeah,
came
I
up, I'm
think that's
sure.
where they were going with the question.
Yeah. Um, I so my dog has registration paperwork available to me, one of them. Actually, I take that back. They both did. And previously of my 12 dogs that I had, I even had some of those with championship bloodlines in them. And I didn't register them, and I didn't for a few reasons. Um, One, because of the 12 dogs that I had, uh, before I knew what I know now, I was getting them neutered and spayed, fairly young. And of course, there's no point to have the paperwork. I wasn't breeding them or anything like that. Um, and also because during that time frame, I had people calling me to ask, I had my store and they would call and say, do you have any customers that would be interested in buying a set of papers? Or would you be interested in purchasing any papers that you could sell at your store? Which was foreign to me. I didn't even know there was a market for that. I'd never heard of that. It didn't cross my mind. And I actually had a couple customers, now that you mention it, who had come in and said, do you know where I can get paperwork? And I'm like, what? No. And I'm like, your dog didn't come with papers? I mean, I don't know what to tell you. No, why? And they said, well, I was thinking of breeding them and you can get more money that way. And I was like, oh my gosh. Okay, no, I'm not your contact for that. Um, but I got so many phone calls about it that it really raised my curiosity on it. So a lady called me from out of state and she asked me, she was super nice on the phone and very pleasant. So I took some time to ask her, I said, so tell me about how this works, because I don't know that I really understand how this works and how do you get papers? Like, I mean, this was years ago, so it's not like it is now where everything can be generated into an almost pristine copy. And she said, well, she was a breeder. And the way it worked was that if she had a litter of, let's say, three puppies, that she would put in for a litter of five or six puppies, and then she would be able to get the paperwork for all of them. And three of the puppies would have their paperwork, and she'd have two or three sets of extra paperwork. And in the course of conversation with her, she'd been a breeder for a long time. And I said, so how does that happen now? And she said, well, you would randomly before somebody from one of these organizations would come out and they would, check your litter, and it was very random, as opposed to early on when it was almost all of them. But like with everything over the times, it becomes more about online access and convenience and that sort of thing. So I said, so isn't that deceiving? Of course, I'm playing stupid while I'm sitting there irritated and mad that this is even happening. And she said, well, it's just another way for us to make money. I go, but it's misleading. People think they have a different level. And she goes, well, it really doesn't matter, does it? She said, because how do you know if a dog is, has this kind of lineage? And we got into somewhat of a conversation. I actually had to cut it short because I was just so upset about this and I wanted to go to the next level. So I spent the next couple weeks reaching out to a number of registration paperwork, organizations that have been known to supply registration paperwork, and you have to go through their application and you have to meet whatever criteria they have, which is not, at that time that I inspected it, was not that difficult. And so I had conversations with people of those organizations, and I said, so exactly how do I do this online? I'm fairly new to this. I have parents that are papered, and I want to be able to continue that. And they're very upfront with telling you how much more money you can get selling dogs with registration paperwork and how you do it and the online and all of this. And of course, there's these implied, imposed, written out penalties if you are in any way, shape, or form not legit or not acting legitimately. I'm like, how do you know? Nobody comes out and checks it. It was so predominant at that time that my phone rang consistently for more than 2 or 3 years with a number
Right.
of people offering this. And it just turned out that there was just no verification. So I got, as this increased, I just, it became sort of a, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, really, you fall in love with who you fall in love with. And when you compare it to human beings, it's no guarantee of a healthier animal. It's no guarantee of a better quality of animal, a smarter animal, an animal with fewer issues. There's no, no guarantee of all any of that. And, people like to say, well, I'd rather get a mutt because they have fewer issues. And it's like, not necessarily. We are who we are. If you as a human can trace your lineage back, is it more likely that you and your offspring will be healthier just because you can trace your lineage back and that sort of thing? Or in that, that was a big thing for a while there. Everybody was tracing their lineage back,
Yeah.
giving up their DNA into the system. And it's the same thing applied to animals. When I started to look at this practically and logically, I thought this is no guarantee of anything except a pricier purchase, a more expensive animal. And so, no, I didn't care. I filed their paperwork in their folders in my file cabinet. And I thought, well, I'm not making puppies anyway.
Right.
And, it's the cat Raisin that I had. Raisin came with a lineage that was phenomenal. He was an Abyssinian cat. And I didn't care. I fell in love with him. He fell in
Right.
love with me. It was like, run on the beach towards each other kind of thing with hair flowing. We were just in, we were each other's person animal. And so it didn't matter to me and I got him fixed.
Right.
So all of that said, no, I don't care about papers. I care about the animal, the health of the animal, the connection with the animal, the value that the animal has to me is tied to my heart.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I also, you said a couple things there I want to call out because I think it's so important to point out some of the myths that come along with these things. And that's really, as you and I, have come across these types of topics. And that's why I wanted to bring it up to you. It was like, oh my gosh, I think I know why you're asking the question because predominantly people will say, well, if I do that, I'm going to get a healthier pet, a better quality pet, a more, developed pet. That's not what that is guaranteeing you. It's just that's not a lot of these registration places. That is not what the purpose and intent is. It is to your point that lineage that okay we can track back, and there are some benefits to that. Sure, I can now see well what kind of health conditions have occurred in that lineage, and what am I likely to encounter, but again, as you pointed out, every being is an individual being. So it's
That
not a guarantee because, oh, yeah, throughout the centuries, if you can go back that far, but even the decades, a lot has changed. I mean, you and I talk about just in the last 5 years. So having that, I'm not going to say there's not a lot of value, but I'm not going to give it the validity that I think far too many people probably give it. And to your point, if you're not breeding, I think some of the attraction and value of what that is otherwise bringing does make me question when I hear someone will say, "Well, I got this," and I'm like, "Oh wow, are you gonna breed?" No, but I just had to have that level because now I've got a health, and I'm like, "Oh, no, gosh, I wish that were the case." But let's if that's where your mindset is, I'm a big positive mental
Sure.
person as well. And then there's the flip side too, where people think that you have to have those types of registrations to be involved with showing your dogs, having them
Right.
at competitions, things of that nature. And that's not the case either. So I think some of the myths on it as well help perpetrate that drive for, well, I've got to have them registered or
Right.
limit
Well,
what they do.
and it's not the people that, there are some serious people in the dog world,
Oh,
serious
absolutely.
people in the dog world that the papers mean something different to them.
Correct.
I'm talking about the average consumer. I'm not talking about the people who can trace everything back. For the average consumer, it's like, how do you prove that set of papers that you were given? How do you know? How do you verify? How do you confirm? And so the extra 5,000, 3,000, 2,000, 1,000, whatever it is that you're paying because that animal is registered. How do you, I mean, is that paperwork worth that much to you? I guess if they're breeding, my concern then is when a consumer is breeding is, and I've experienced a lot of this in my store, where consumers are breeding and they're not looking for health issues. They're not even aware of the health issues. There's certain breeds with mitral heart valve propensity. There's certain breeds with, that just, I mean, all kinds of breeds that are more prone to certain things for their breed. And it's like, do you know about that? Oh no, I never heard of that. Oh God.
Right. Yeah.
And I so wish you weren't breeding. Animals that come with a variety of issues that, on birth, the person's telling me about it, and I go, okay, so when you sell that puppy, you need to withhold paperwork and the ability to breed because this is now an issue. This is an issue that we don't want to see continue. And they'll look at me like, what do you mean? I had puppies for the reason of, so people could breed them. And and I'm like, but you're gonna perpetuate this issue.
Right.
And it's concerning from the standpoint of, okay, you still don't understand why this is an issue. And now I'm concerned. I'm concerned for that puppy who's going to grow up, and I'm concerned for the puppies it's going to have. And the whole thing is just like, ugh. Conversely, the customers that I've had over the years that are so disappointed because they went and they rescued. And they said, well, I rescued so that I wouldn't get a dog with any issues. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's a living being, people. You
Yeah.
don't know what issues a living being's going to come with. And it's no different than human parents,
Right.
who have a child and the child is born with a heart defect or something like that. You don't know that that's going to come. Yeah, you're healthy, your spouse is healthy, all your lineage behind you was healthy, but this particular being is not. And you have to look at this of there's no guarantees with anything that's living of how it's going to turn out. And so if you choose from the standpoint of love, you continue that relationship with love and you look at and understand that perpetuation of issues is not love, it's greed. Then you will take a step back and you'll do the right thing. Get your dog spayed or neutered, or at least be a responsible parent and make sure that they're never in a situation, if that's your choice not to spay or neuter, that you can create a situation that's unwanted. And it all comes back to what's the value on that paperwork? Well, it has a price, as I found out all those years ago. You can actually put a price on that, which is super disappointing.
Right. Well, you hit on a couple of things there, and I wanted to follow up on because I know we've both known truly professional, deeply devoted breeders, And there's a difference there.
There
There is a
is.
huge difference. And I know I've found myself throughout my years in the pet world being, you know, approached by all sides, going, we've got to stop breeding, we've got to promote, this and that. And I have rescues. I, always have, just because that's how it's, broke for me, basically. That being said, I've also met some amazing breeders
Hmm.
and been out to their places and seen the true depth of their care, the time they put in. And so when they're using these registrations and they're putting their time in, I almost feel like when you were saying that is like I don't remember them touting the registrations
Right.
as
Right.
like the end all be all. They would say they have this, they have that, they have this, but that is all the product and the result of all of the other things we
Hmm.
prioritize: the health, the socialization, and so on and so forth. And you walk through that facility and you were like, wow,
Yeah.
this is amazing. This is not, so I think it's also just one of those, because I've known, I had a friend who thought they had to, once they got their particular puppy. Well, I think you have to register them. I was like, no, you don't.
No.
You don't. Your local, city, et
So
cetera.
registration places will tell you you do.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And that, because I asked, and that's why I was saying, I was like, so it's just that, like, I just find that instead of being the main drive, it's just a part of some of the discussion, if you
It should be
will.
ancillary. It's
Yeah, it is.
ancillary. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Because really what it's all about is the puppy. Of the 12 dogs that I had, nine of those, and they were all purebred, except for one, two.
yeah,
They were designer. Um, nine of them were I had gotten out of rescue or health situations, so it's like those are available out there if you know how to handle that. And I did. And it didn't bother me. I had a Yorkie with welded knees because that's the
mm,
way it was born. I had a little mixed dog that the one of my dear friends, one of the vets I worked with, she said, "Oh my gosh, her knees are reversed. They bend the wrong
oh,
way." I go, "I
wow.
know, she's perfect, isn't she?" And she said she really is. She's so cute. And she didn't know it. You know what I mean? The dog had no clue and was fine. But one of the dogs I have now, the breeder told me, she goes, "Are you going to breed?" And I said, "No." And she goes, "Okay, so we need to talk about the papers." And I said, "We don't." And she goes, "Well, I have a policy." It's like she didn't hear me say we don't.
Right.
And she goes, "Well, I have a policy." And I said, "I'm going to stop you right there. You can keep the papers." And
Yeah.
she kind of looked at me and I said, "Honestly, I just want a nice, healthy puppy."
Yeah.
And I fell in love with her. I was there a week after she was born and bonded with her all the time. And I said, I just want, I just, we love her and we just want a healthy puppy. And the breeder was like, "Oh, I mean, you don't even want to hear?" And I said, don't care about the papers. So, but her thing too was, I get the dog back if anything happens. If you decide you don't want to keep her, I get the dog back. There was all these stipulations, and it was like, yes, this is how this should go. I
Right.
she wanted to be sure that her puppy didn't end up in the wrong place in the wrong hands and all of that kind of stuff. So, and she asked me, she goes, "Are you going to spay?" And I said, "Probably eventually, but certainly not for some time." And
Sure.
she goes, "But you're not going to bring," and she finally got to know me, pretty well. And she goes, I completely believe you." And I said, "She'll never be in a position be to have something happen where we have something unwanted." And I said, "And frankly, she's too small, in my opinion, to breed. And on top of that, I'm not interested in breeding because then I would have to keep all of them because then I would be freaked out over where they're going. I'm not I'm just not cut out for letting go." So
I'm the same. You know, it's funny you say that though too, because when you said that, it did remind me. I ran across one of the um, rescue organizations who was telling me that they were in the process of getting registrations for some of their animals because they felt it was easier to then get them adopted out. And at the time, I really didn't have the depth of knowledge, but I would go back now today and be like, is that really, part of the criteria that you want your adopters to have? Um, I don't know. I don't know. It's unique. I like that you brought that up because, and I will say this too. The other thing that just struck me when you said that was this. I think it's great that I'm not just worried about the care of this being that I was a part of the process in bringing into this world. If you can't deal, it comes back to me. We see that a lot in the pet adoption world, and I will say, like, that has happened a lot more often. So that's not a shallow request
right.
requirement. That is a no, but I'm invested in this and I want to make sure this being is being placed properly. And going back to the ancillary thing that we were just talking about, the money is one thing, but it's not the main thing. So I love that there. I do want to also bring up because I know there's going to be some folks out there that will look and go, well, there's a lot of different kinds of organizations. It's not just about the breed itself. There are all these other things. And I've been involved with many different types of organizations. And what I will say is any type of organization that you're looking into getting your animal registered into, find out what that really means before you spend the money, before you spend the time, and before it doesn't meet your expectations. Because I will say there are some really good organizations out there that these things can have a real impact, especially when it's associated with a medical issue.
Right.
Um, but just as much, we've seen those areas great. And so I will just say, hey, there's a lot of good and there's a lot of misinformation and myths out there that are being, perpetuated and propagated. Don't fall for that. Do the research
Well,
because,
and listen
yeah,
to the response. Don't, people when they hear what they want to hear, they accept it
right.
instantly.
Yeah.
Oh yes, that's what I want to hear. And this is like marketing. They all know the right things to say that is like, okay, good, good. I really wanted to hear that I was getting, a great organization behind, and this is puppies, cats, whatever. It's not
Yeah. Yeah.
specific to puppies. Um, but you have to dig in. You have to really examine it. I mean, I went so far as to call the organizations and ask them straight up, how do you confirm how many puppies are in, well, all the breeders are registered with us. And I go, but how do you confirm? I mean, people lie every day. How do you confirm that
Right.
there's
Well,
actually
and is
been
it a
this
one
number of
time?
puppies?
Yeah. And
Right.
is it a one time or is there hey, there's a cadence. Maybe it's not a regulated cadence, but we'll go back randomly. We were talking about that when we started here. That used to be the way.
Right. Right.
And so if you know when something's coming, most people can, fake it till they make it.
Yes.
And then it's okay, that was good. We got through that. We don't have to worry about that because that won't happen again for 5 years, 10 years. That's that's not a good thing either. So
Right.
yeah, no, I like that. So many things to think about this. I'm glad they asked the question because it really does make you look at we all want to again, I think for some it is about the money. I think for others it's about the myths, and then for those others, that it's everybody is so bombarded with information about.
Yes.
It's like, well, I've got to do this because I've got to
Mhm.
show I'm a great pet parent. To Lauren's point, run with your wind in the hair straight to that pet and give it a big, pat, belly rub, etc., that's all your pet cares about. They're not walking around with a little badge, hey, I've got
I'm
this.
AKC champion lineage, or something like that.
Yeah, any of them, I see a lot of vests these days too.
Oh my gosh,
And
therapy dog, emotional support dog. We got to do something on all of that too.
yeah, we absolutely do. I saw a good one the other day. Someone had badass, what dog, and I was like, now that's one I might get for Bella.
Yeah, right?
You know, so no, but this was great. This is a great discussion. I hope you all feel a little bit more enlightened about, hey, I've heard about it, I've thought about it, etc. Lauren, thanks, because you really have a lot of knowledge about this. So I'm on the cursory on some of that. It's wild. It is a
It
wild
is.
west out there.
It is. It's disappointing. Just, fall in love, people. That's it.
Fall in love. I love it. Well, hey, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Remember, you can always send us more questions. That's what generated this discussion here. Practicalpetchat@gmail.com. Check us out on all the different social medias. We're everywhere, podcasts, vidcasts, all the rest of that, just fun stuff. But thank you. We know your time is valuable. Go give
Thanks,
your pets a
guys.
big love from us. Take care.
Yeah, if you get the urge to send us pictures of your pets, we would love that too.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as, nor should it be construed as, professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for your pets. Always seek the advice of a qualified veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding your pet's health or medical condition. Never disregard professional veterinary advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The hosts and the guests of this podcast are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared during these episodes. Any reliance on the information provided is solely at your own risk. Copyright 2025 Practical Pet Chat, all rights reserved. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or reproduction of any content from this podcast, including but not limited to audio, scripts, and show notes, is prohibited without prior written consent. The opinions and views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Practical Pet Chat.